All righty, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show with your hosts, Alex, and my number one research intern, Christopher Condit, your American villain voices, and as always, serving up the lukewarmiest of lukewarm opinions. There is no hot oven, but we're not pulling it straight out of the freezer either. We are always dead in the middle, room temperature. Socials, follow them. Go check us out on YouTube if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple. If you're watching us on YouTube, go check us out on Spotify and Apple. There is no new content for you there, but you can just listen to us a little more and juice our numbers a little bit.
You can listen to our car. Listen in your car. Listen with it under your pillow. Just all the things, everything you can do to boost our numbers is what we want.
Well, I told Katie when she gets insomnia, she should just put on the podcast and let our voices just lull her right back to sleep.
The dulcet tones of our voices just put her back to sleep. Yeah, I like that.
That's the excitement and interest that we bring to this. The only person that's excited to listen to us is the Godfather himself.
Yeah, that is an advertisement for the pod right there. If you can't sleep, put this on.
Listen, man. Whatever gets us paid. If we need to get into ASMR, I can tap on this a little bit if you want. I'll do it. I have said from the outset of this podcast, I will be a corporate shill. Give us your OnlyFans dollars. I will take it all. And on that note, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. We are living the absolute dream here. It's a wet and cold day in North Carolina, and it looks like it's going to rain for the next several months based on the forecast. But we're doing great. We're living the dream. Villa are doing okay. We come off a decent win, not the best win as we talked about in our last pod. And we have a beatable opponent here coming up on the weekend. So all things considered, we're in a good spot. And the Premier League right now is looking extremely interesting, isn't it?
It is. It is condensed. There are opportunities. Chelsea continue to plummet. Arsenal now is really wishing that they ponied up the £60 million for a one Oliver Watkins, which would have allowed us to keep the one and only John Duran, who cannot stop scoring in the Saudi league. Much better than Ivan Toney since having gone there. Hey, listen, there are guys that have gone there that have not scored bunches. So
Ivan
he's got
Toney probably had the under on 10.5 goals.
I personally am most looking forward to on Saturday. I think it'll be much more exciting when we hang out as opposed to the Villa game on Saturday morning. That's right. Chris and I are set for our... Actually, I was going to say semi-annual, but I think we're more on like a quarterly hangout.
It's close to quarterly now. Yeah, it's somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, we had my birthday. We had the trip out to Villa Park, and now we've got our Q1 hangout planned this Saturday afternoon. But before we get there, before we get to watch his kids run around in the rain and drink a few beers, we need to talk
about... The kids are not drinking the beers. We're drinking the beers, just for the record. That was unclear the way you said it. The kids will not be drinking beers. I'm not that bad of a parent.
That bad. Hey, you know what? Leave a little mystery out there. Sometimes CJ and Hobbs get a little sip when we bring them to a brewery. You never know. But before we can talk about the excitement that is our wives meeting, we need to talk about the excitement that is Ipswich, the one and only Ed Sheeran's boys visiting Villa Park Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. Actually, the Axel Tuanzebe Derby, as most of the media is calling it nowadays, of course.
Sure.
He has 11 starts for them. He's getting some minutes.
I always liked him as a player. I saw that in the notes when you put up the rundown, and I always thought that he didn't quite have the right fit at the time that we needed him. And I thought he was a decent player. I think he's a decent player. He has one of the best songs I've ever heard for a single player. He plays football with his head. He plays football with his feet. Everybody's dancing to that Tuanzebe beat. That's incredible.
Can you give us a tune, please, Chris?
There's not much of a tune to it. He plays football with his head. He plays football with his feet. Everybody's dancing to that Tuanzebe beat. Tuanzebe. It's a great song. If you haven't heard it, look it up. It's all over social media. And like I said, I do think he's a decent player. I think Ipswich is probably closer to a better place for him in terms of a place he's going to be able to get more minutes. Although right now we could use him, couldn't we? Huh? Yeah, we could use it. We can use an accent to Nzabi. Come on back over. Just put a blue shirt, put a claret shirt on, and go. Let's go.
Did you see Courtney Haas's Instagram story with the cryogenic thing over his nose? Said whatever it takes.
He's not listed as a player, right? Outside of just he's in the squad, but he's never been on the active roster this season, as far as I
don't think he is. Yeah, I don't think we registered him as a Premier League player. I don't think he could play even if we wanted him to.
Right.
I do think that. I think we just had whatever we can register, 23 guys, 25 guys or something, and he just didn't make it. And, from what I've read, Unai has allowed him to continue to train with the first team squad so that he's ready. I think there was a lot of him coming back from injury and stuff like that. What do I know? But I
did see that. He was great.
I think that's the way it works legally. But anyway, instead of talking about the player that is not here, we'll talk about some other players that are not here. But first, let's talk about the Ipswich players that will be showing up on Saturday. So the last time out, we were largely outplayed by Ipswich earlier this season. You might recall a 2-2 draw. Yes, we shaded possession, but they doubled us up on shots, 15-7. They doubled us up on shots on target, 5-3. And you and I spoke in the post-match about how they really took it to us. We were not expecting that. They were pretty awful going into that game, and yet Liam Delap took huge advantage of our very, very high line. You might recall him sprinting past a flailing Ezri Konsa, who was playing right back on the day. I think that was the start of you and I saying in this new system, Ezri Konsa doesn't necessarily serve as a right back. And since then, I wouldn't say that it's gotten much better for Ipswich. I won't say that that's their high water mark on the season, but they are still 19th on 16 points. They've lost a lot. They've lost 4 straight, I believe, for the first time this entire season. And they're getting smacked. 2-1 to Southampton, not bad until you remember how bad Southampton are in 20th. 4-1 to Liverpool, 6-0 to City while they're going through this awful stretch of theirs. Another 2-0 to Brighton. And it's not like they're getting particularly unlucky or anything. I mean, their expected goals and their goals for, their expected goals against, their goals against are pretty on par. So they are about as bad as all the metrics would indicate that they would be.
Yeah. So I can remember like the preview, the review of the last game, being frustrated with the way the game went. And I remember this being particularly bad for the defensive structure, like you mentioned. This was kind of the game where we looked at Ezri Konsa and said, maybe that's not the place for him. And I think I speak for both of us when I say, like, we were really surprised at how much Ipswich were able to play the game they wanted to play the first time around against Villa. Now, the question is going to be for me, what happens this time around at Villa Park with a largely different lineup, both due to injury and due to new faces in the squad? Villa looked a little better in recent times in terms of the level of play, at least against Spurs. I think there's reason for optimism. I think that this is a winnable game, like I said. The question is, how is Emery going to set up? Is he going to set a very high line again and potentially expose the side to Liam Delap again, who, like you wisely pointed out, absolutely crushed us in the first time around? Or are we going to set up in a way that allows more like what we saw against Tottenham, and potentially have some space to attack against a poor Ipswich defense?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, and you know that I hate to rely on stereotypes when we talk about analysis. I think it's lazy. Lille last year, I kind of ripped the Claret and Blue show for saying, oh, Lille is just going to sit in. And I was like, everything that you look at would say that they're not going to sit in against us. They're going to come out.
And you were right.
And I was spot on. Pat myself on the back for that one. Now, that being said, our first match was obviously at Ipswich because this one's at home. And yet they played it very much like a lower table side would play an away match. They sat in, they let us have the ball, and then they just hit us repeatedly on the break, and we couldn't do anything about it. So the interesting fact is, now that we're at home, I don't really see Unai Emery approaching the game much differently than he did before. The personnel will be different, but you would still expect Ipswich to sit in, concede a little bit of the ball, and then have Villa, have it, and then they'll try and hit us on the counter. And the stats actually do back that up when you look at how Ipswich plays home versus away. Now, they have a balanced attack down both wings. We saw the way Liam Delap was floating to the left to attack Ezri Konsa and Diego Carlos for that first game against them. And yet they sit back way more on the road. So they spend 8% more time in their own defensive third when they're away from home as opposed to when they're at home, as you would expect. So to your point of, are we going to be able to draw them out and hit the space in behind like we did against Spurs? I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. I think that they are still aggressive in spots like we saw early in the year. They will press once we kind of cross that halfway line, and they will try and hit quickly vertically. But I think it's going to be interesting from a Villa perspective of, once again, the same question that we ask all year: when a team sits in and we can't play quick through the lines, how do we break them down?
Right. So that was going to be my next question, was what is going to be the difference maker in this game then, if we assume that you're correct, that Ipswich is going to sit deep and wait for Villa to attack and then try and spring a counter, which is what was super successful, like you said, in the first time around. And Villa, among many others, by the way, have really struggled to break down a low block. I mean, you can see right now, just to use another side as an example, Liverpool are having a hell of a time trying to break through a low block. That has led to struggles in consecutive games for them now, where teams have set up and just soaked up pressure and tried to hit on the counter, and it's worked in their favor. Everton XG wise against Liverpool outplayed Liverpool. So I only bring that up to show that it's not just Villa that struggle against the low block. And some of it, I think, is, if you think about the larger defensive organization and planning that goes into game planning nowadays, is more advanced than even 20 years ago, much more advanced than 30 years ago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have much more meticulous and advanced scouting that allows for better defensive organization, and then it just boils down to execution. So which team out executes the other, that's the team that succeeds. I wonder if we don't see some changes, or at least maybe quicker substitutions on Unai Emery's part to try and change how the attack looks. And we've got some new faces to do it, because I think that's really the only major difference that you can see between the first game away and this one coming up on Saturday, is you have some new personnel in attack, a decent amount of new personnel in attack that can potentially change the outcome or change the way the game feels.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good point. And I think there's two things that Villa can do tactically to try and be a little bit more successful. And I'll start actually with what I think that Ipswich is going to do, because that kind of plays into this. So Ipswich, despite scoring the most goals in the championship last year, have been on an awful run of even creating opportunities for themselves. They haven't cracked double-digit shots in a match since late December. So we're looking at a month and a half at this point. And when they did, it was only 10 for 2 matches in a row, and then they went back to not having double-digit shots. So, like, it's been a while, and they're not going to get many opportunities. So that works in Villa's favor defensively. Obviously, we've said, Villa's problem is not only are they conceding high quality opportunities, but they're conceding a lot of high quality opportunities. So at least, the way Ipswich plays is going to potentially play into that. So if I'm Ipswich, what am I trying to do? Well, when you look at Villa's back line, you've got Boubacar Kamara, a natural defensive midfielder who we've said over the past couple games has suspect positioning due to that defensive midfielder instinct. He's liable to step up a little too far. And then on the right-hand side, you've got two brand new players who have never played together and barely played under this manager in Garcia and Disasi, who I expect to start because we have no one else. I mean, maybe Bogard. Either way, whether it's Disasi or Bogard, it's either a brand new guy who's never played under this manager or like a 21-year-old who's never played with his right back. So either way, I'm looking at those three, that right side of the defense, and saying, Liam Delap, get over there, attack quickly. We'll have Omari Hutchison, whoever else is in there attacking. I forgot to check if there's any injuries that they're dealing with. Get up beside him and try and score. And so if you're Villa, the first thing you have to do is make the most of the opportunities when Ipswich steps out to attack. Because I just said they're not going to do it very often. And what I would want Villa to do is try and almost draw them in, turn them over, and then what we said Arsenal did to us in the first match earlier this season, counter the counter. Ipswich is going to counter, rely on those guys to win the ball, and try and go quickly the other way, because Ipswich defense is very weak against through balls. I actually think, to your point, it could be like Spurs, where if we can get Yori on the turn, get Morgan Rogers on the turn and running at their defense, we actually have a high opportunity to be successful. The second is Asensio. We need someone who has that kind of creativity, that touch on the ball. It used to be Emi Buendia. Before that, it was Philippe Coutinho, who's just going to see some angles and see some passes to break down the defense that a lot of our other players otherwise would not be able to identify. So I think unleash him at maybe the 55 minute mark as opposed to 65-70 if we're still struggling to break them down. And then otherwise, you just need to know if they're running at our goal, not only do you need to defend, but you need those guys in the right mindset of, we need to turn this around quickly and go at them as soon as we get the ball.
Right. So that answers my question in terms of what you were going to do with Asensio, which I agree. He's coming off the bench for me as well, because I think in the long term he could potentially start, and by the long term I mean like a month ish from now, because that's what we're looking at in terms of the seasons left. But I don't think Unai brings him in to start just yet, because of how new he is. But I think the Spurs game showed what he's capable of, and like we talked about, he looks very good for a player that hasn't played in 2 months. But I think you're going to see the same sort of thing in terms of new boys. I think they're going to be replacement or substitutes, not starters. But the good news again is they're fresh legs. If nothing else, they haven't played much, so they're fresh legs, and they bring, like you said, a different level, or different style to the attack that can change what Villa are doing. I'm optimistic about this game, but I'm usually the most optimistic on this podcast. But I think anytime that we're facing a lower table team at home, I feel pretty good about it, despite the fact that there have been some ups and downs this season. But I think that the biggest concern for me, and you've already highlighted it, so I don't want to go too much into it, but is the lack of cohesion on the defensive side, both in the defensive midfield but especially in the back four, because there's so many injuries. You've changed everything from behind the wings and forwards. So I think that if there's going to be a crack in the foundation, it's going to be there. But that's also probably what Ipswich do best in a season that's been tough for them, which is to be expected coming back up the way they play. But I think that the first 30 minutes of this game are going to give us a good sense of how it's going to go. If Villa can get on the front foot and play well, then you could potentially see 2-0 up at half and we're feeling pretty comfortable. If we don't have our finishing boots on, like we didn't against Spurs, then it could get nervy at the end. It's not as if Ipswich are incapable of scoring, and we certainly saw it the first time around that they can create chances, even if they haven't lately.
Yeah, from an Ipswich perspective, I mean, it's going to come and go the way Liam Delap does. He's got 11 goal involvements in 22 starts in that squad. Really impressive. I think he's been worth every penny that they've paid for him. But, I talked about Villa from the perspective of what I think they need to do tactically. Chris, what are you doing from a lineup perspective?
That's a great question, given what we have available. So here's what I put together. I've got Emi Martinez in goal, like you, Garcia, Disasi, Kamara. I've got Luka Dean on the left. I'm interested to know if you make a change there to Maatson. McGinn and Tielemans in the defensive midfield. Like you mentioned, I think this is another game where you've got the potential ability for both those players to excel on the turn. And then up front, I have the same that we went with before: Bailey, Rogers, JJ, and up top is Daniel Malen. But I just for now think that's the best potential lineup. I think, like I said, in the long term, you could see Asensio or Rashford making an appearance there, either on the left or in the center, respectively. But right now, I think this is the lineup, but you could see an earlier substitution if things aren't going well. Like you said, 50, 55 minutes, something like that. What about you? Do you have any changes to that lineup or anything that you disagree with?
No, I think that's the lineup I would go with as well. I think with the amount of injuries that we have, I think that there are only two potential changes that Unai would even consider. He could stick with Bogard over Disasi just for the simple fact of, as we've said repeatedly, he doesn't like to throw new guys to the fire. You're playing the team in
this may be
19. You might
forced,
see
right?
it might be forced, but he might say, team 19th, we don't play again. Like, let's just put Bogard out there just because he kind of knows the system and what I want a little bit more than Disasi does. I don't think he's going to do that, but I could see it, I suppose. And then the other was that I thought I saw a tweet or an article earlier this week that apparently Mings was back in training and potentially in contention to play this weekend. I wouldn't start him coming off the series of injuries that he's had. Clearly was not ready for the minutes that we gave him. But with the crisis that we're having at the back, having his leadership, having his commanding presence, maybe he does get in there. Kamara bumps up into the midfield, and then I would say probably Ramsey comes off and Rogers goes wide left with McGinn playing the 10. So like that would be kind of the cascading effect. I think both of those are too soon or unnecessary. So I agree with your lineup. Those are just two other ideas.
Yeah, Mings was in training. He was in a picture where they put Villa put a picture up on Twitter or social media anyway. I don't know if it was Twitter or whatever. Of John McGinn, and losers like me immediately saw a blurred out, Tyrone Mings behind him, and like there he is. I see him back there. So yes, I can confirm, because I'm a loser, that I saw that Tyrone Mings was in training, because I looked way too closely at a picture of John McGinn. You're welcome.
How blurry was it? Was it potentially the new Kitman who just happened to be back there and optical illusion looked taller than the 5?
It was clearly him. It was clearly Mings. We're not talking about like the grassy knoll in the Zapruder film or something like that. No, we're good.
Okay, good. You heard it here first. Confirmed. It was Tyrone Mings. Chris used AI to unscramble the photo.
Yeah, confirmed. I have no life, and just look way too closely at pictures from training.
Well done, sir.
Yeah.
Score.
I was gonna say 2-0, but I'm gonna say 2-1 because we never keep a clean sheet. So I'll go 2-1 Villa. I still think we get the 3 points, but we're going to give up a goal that we probably shouldn't, and Emi Martinez will probably make a save to keep it at 2-1.
So before I concur with your score, I will say that Villa has won, I think, 19 of their last 20 against teams in the relegation zone. Unfortunately, the loss was our last 2-0 loss to Wolves. We are also undefeated in the league at home since our loss to Arsenal. That is, however, only 6 wins and 5 draws. Technically undefeated, but not a lot of wins in there either. So what I would say with all of that is that, especially the way Ipswich is playing, it's unlikely for us to lose. Now, whether we are able to generate enough offensively and keep them out defensively, it remains to be seen. I don't think that we've instilled any amount of confidence in the fan base this year for that, but I'm going to agree with you. I think at home against this opposition, the way they've been conceding opportunities and just the sheer luck of, if we get enough shots, we'll probably finish 2 of them. I think it'll be a 2-1 victory.
Yeah. And for those of you who were watching and saw that this went suddenly from a 2-shot with Alex and me to a 1-shot of just Alex, that's because I hit the wrong button because I was trying to mute my mic because I thought that I was going to cough.
I was wondering what happened there.
That was me. Yeah. No, I was trying to mute my mic and I hit remove by accident. So
I was getting so ready to just bring it home all on my own.
No, I was here the whole time. I removed myself from the stage. So technology is hard when you're old, folks. I apologize.
All right, Chris, anything else on this match?
I just, again, another winnable match, and where this is really where you have to see or want to see the team making hay and picking up points, because you're going to need them. Even if the goal is just to finish in Europe, anywhere in Europe, that you need points. Obviously, we have the cup, the FA Cup that we're working on as well, and Champions League. We can't lose focus on this either because of those 2 competitions. I know we talked about last time that the FA Cup is a higher priority now, which I still think it is, but we still need to pick up points where we can get them. And a team in 19th that's struggling is a place at home is a place to pick up 3 points.
I think that's a great way to close it or close that segment, because actually you have given me a straight layup for our demanding of apologies. And as we do sometimes the demanding of apology is actually us giving one. I need to apologize for misguiding the Villarati everywhere online, all dozens of our listeners. Last time I said that the FA Cup did not have much fixture congestion around it. We had a week break until our next match the subsequent Saturday. I was stupid. I forgot about the Champions League matches that have yet to be scheduled and put on the Google Calendar, because
in fairness, I did too.
Yeah. So there actually will be another match 2 or 3 days after the FA Cup. I do think that kind of complicates whether Unai Emery goes all out. Hopefully we don't need to go all out to beat this competition. Famous last words, I suppose. But yeah, so I apologize. My bad, Villarati. It actually is quite a hectic period when we have the FA Cup and Champions League next.
I looked at the same schedule though. So again, I didn't realize it either. So there's equal blame across that, because I was thinking the same thing when I was like, oh man, we're wide open here. We can take like a week off. Let's do it. Yeah.
We are the epitome of the Batman meme. I've failed you, and I'm sorry.
Oh man, what a time. But still, the reason that, and I don't want to harp on it because we already did a pod on it. If you didn't listen, go back and listen to our Spurs recap pod. The FA Cup is a priority now because A, you're in a legit cup run now that you're in the quarterfinal, and B, like we talked about, this is a qualification for Europe. If you win the FA Cup, you get a spot in Europa, and that would be a successful season, as we've talked about from literally the first podcast we did this season. That qualifying for Europe, particularly Europa or higher, is success to both you and I. And whether that's done in the league or in the cup, either one works for me. And with the cup, you get the added benefit of raising a trophy.
Couldn't agree more. And so we'll just move on. Chris, any other apologies or anything else before we get out of here?
I don't think so. I may have one down the road. I need to do a little more research into it before I do it. But I had mentioned to you, it's one of my favorite targets, and he happens to coach for Newcastle, but he's not the coach. You might think he is, but he's not. That's all I'll say. But I need to make sure I have everything vetted before I actually come for him.
That's a nice little teaser for those who have been with us for quite a while. So if you think you know who Chris is talking about, slide tackle into our DMs. Let us know.
Or you could just look at the center of every picture of Newcastle, because he always makes sure to stand there.
Stop with the hints. Jeez. Trying to generate engagement here.
I do like, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Hashtag NUFC.
It's like you're new at this. We've been doing this for too long, sir. Over a year.
We're a year. Yeah.
100+ episodes. Probably 75+ episodes.
Yeah. We're really cranking them out now, though. Like we have gotten on a solid schedule.
We have, although right now we are not on schedule. We are rambling. So let's get out of here while we still can. Everybody stay tuned. After Chris and I hang out this weekend, we'll probably have another one out to recap Ipswich and preview whatever matches after that. I'm too tired to look. Until then, as always, up the Villa.
Up the Villa.
Hi, Mom and Dad.